Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Eric Eastman, and today we're going to talk a little bit about leveraging rubrics, grading rubrics. And today's topic of discussion is related to grading discussions, a foundational component of online learning. I believe all of us would agree that the discussion aspect is a central component of online education and learning. It replaces the traditional classroom for brick and mortar applications here. So we're going to discuss this in greater detail today. The outline, as you can see on this cover slide, is presented, and we'll have future discussions about grading written assignments, PowerPoints, and other multimedia applications in parts 2 and 3, respectively. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right to the heart of the matter here. Rubric rationale and history. If you're not familiar, grading rubrics have been used really for the better part of the duration of entire higher education. A lot of reasons. These are just a few of the more well-referenced, researched, and agreed upon rationale for using rubrics. The one that I'm most fond of is increasing the efficiency of grading. As we all know, anything we can do to be more objective and fair is great, but also being efficient in our grading, and that turnaround time is something that plays into the student experience and student satisfaction as well. Decreases student grade appeals and allows for competency measures, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in this presentation. So rubrics have been around for a long time. There are some best practices we are going to cover in this presentation and the future ones. Again, it's not the only way to create a rubric and utilize it. So I've really tried to hit the middle of the road, so to speak, on rubric development and considerations. In the future, hopefully we will have the ability to actually integrate rubrics, apply them directly into the grade book. Currently in our LEO online learning management system, you would need to copy and paste those in your grade feedback to students. Pretty simple to do though, and we will have other information that should help facilitate the expediency of that process. So for discussions, the 5 primary aspects, grade components, if you will, really boil down to the primary post content. A lot of people will abbreviate this as content. It can include word count recommendations, like around 250 to 500 words with one reference citation and so on and so forth. It also is inclusive of comprehension and the question response relevance. So if we ask a discussion question and a student is completely off track or is misinterpreting the question or does not respond to the question appropriately, obviously content deductions would apply. Engagement and interaction. This is a hallmark of online learning best practices that we've talked about before. The more interaction students get in the online discussion board and environment, the better their learning outcomes. The better their critical thinking, and the better and more improved satisfaction with that online course, and the faculty engagement there is obviously are obviously positive outcomes there. So engagement interaction posts. I typically ask students to at least respond to 2 or 3 students and or faculty responses within the week. But again, you can specify whatever number is you feel is most relevant for your course and content. Word counts, again, can be applied, maybe around 25 to 50 words, and other criteria may be specified for obvious reasons. Spelling, grammar, and writing may or may not be included or collapsed with referencing. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. I like to keep those separate simply because they really are 2 different things. So some will refer to spelling, grammar, and writing as articulation or collegiate writing, and that articulation needs to be consistent. We should have few punctuation, grammar, spelling errors, especially given all the technological tools we have at our disposal these days. So it is important. Now, the one caveat here is perhaps you might be teaching a population of English as a second language students, and therefore this may be applied differently for obvious reasons. Referencing, again, APA format, MLA format, or any other format you specify. As long as it is specified, it is commonly applied. And again, this is normally combined. So if you require one reference in APA format, that comprises the rubric. Some will split that out, but you'll see that more commonly on a written assignment rubric, which is slightly more detailed than the discussions. And then the last one, again, I think is important, although some faculty will not include this, which is fine, especially if you've already cited a late penalty in your course room. But I do like the timeliness for any graded work, including discussions, because again, coming into a discussion board the week after it ends is like walking into a classroom after everybody's left. The value of that participation and limited, obviously absent of any interaction, should have some kind of penalty or grade consideration to it. So again, you can specify what that is or simply refer to university late policy as a default. So I think those really comprise the 5 most common aspects of the discussions. Again, you may only choose to use 2 or 3 of these aspects, which is perfectly fine as long as you have rationale for that. So we're going to get into the weights applied for discussions, and this will show up here on the levels of performance here in just a moment. Again, we're going to stick with those 5 aspects. The ranges that I've found in the research typically are applied here on this slide. 35 to 50% of the total weight of a discussion grade should be based on that content aspect. 35 to 55% on engagement and interaction. There is an argument, and a sufficient one, that engagement interaction is even more important than the primary post content. So you can certainly see that. You could see a 55% application weight for engagement and perhaps maybe only a 35% for primary post content. You'll see as we go through the final 3 aspects here: spelling, grammar, writing, also known as articulation, referencing APA format, and timeliness, range typically from 5 to 10%. Again, if you collapse any of these, go ahead and adjust those percentages accordingly. And as shouldn't need to mention, but we want those weights to add up to 100%. So let's go on to levels of performance. 4-point level of performance is most common. Again, you can have 3 levels. Some may only have 2 levels. If it's a competency-based assignment, maybe it's meets competency or does not meet competency. It can be as simple as a 2-point level of performance, or it can certainly be expanded into 5, 6, 7 points levels of performance. As I began this presentation, I wanted to kind of pick a middle of the road approach that is common, certainly not the only way to apply rubrics, but one that I think is balanced and fair and makes sense for most of our applications. So whether you call this exemplary performance, superior, or exceeds, all 3 are typically used interchangeably, and the definition here is just it includes information beyond the intent of the assignment prompt. So this student went above and beyond what was expected of them, and it was clear and evident. They would receive the A+, 10 points, 10 out of 10, 100% grade application for that exemplary performance. We then look at competent, sufficient, or meets expectations, and there may be a good argument for some classes and content to not include an exemplary, superior, or exceeds level of performance. Simply base it on the competent, sufficient, or meets level at the highest point, and of course that would be 10 points instead of 9 if that was your choice to use 3 levels of performance that way. There is research to support exemplary, superior, exceeds levels, and that really does motivate students to go beyond and above the expectations, which optimizes critical thinking. It also justifies an A+ grade and helps us avoid grade inflation. So as you can see, obviously that level 3, the competent level here, is graded at 90 or 9 points or 90% A-, which is obviously, again, above average. They've met all the criteria in there, but they didn't go above and beyond. Now, again, there can be arguments for and against this application. You can change that to 9.3 if you feel that's more fair and representative of a low A grade because they have met all of the assignment expectations. Level 2 needs improvement, or some will simply list this as approaches competency. Some information is missing or errant as related to the prompt. We're looking really in the range of a C grade. Again, some faculty will argue maybe it should be a B grade or maybe it should be a D grade, but as long as you are clear in your grade rubric development and explain that to students that, look, if something's missing, it's going to earn up to 7 or 70% of the potential points available. And then the lowest category, 1, unacceptable or does not meet, either means little or none of the assignment prompt information is provided or relevant. Now, again, we can take this one level further to a 0 level and simply state that no work was submitted, and that's acceptable too. That would obviously qualify for a 0-point rubric. If the work wasn't done, can't grade it, it's a 0 point. So there is the potential there for 5 levels of performance. Again, I'm not trying to make this more complicated than it needs to be, so the unacceptable or does not meet performance with whatever comment you would put, no assignment was uploaded, you could manually enter 0 points. Again, I recommended here anything less than 6 points if it's unacceptable. That would get us down to the D and or F range for obvious reasons, and I think everyone would hopefully agree with that. So we're going to take just a real quick look here at a couple of links that I found good rubric information, some historical context, some research based on those. One is by the University of Central Florida, and the other one here, University of Indiana. I've got a simple example. I'm going to go ahead and open here of what that looks like. Hopefully it'll open. Okay, here's the simple rubric, and again, I will hyperlink these so you can look at them in a little bit closer detail. An example of quality of post, relevance, contribution to learning committee. So there's only 3 aspects on this with a 4-point or 4-level rubric for performance. And again, they use the 0 rubric as the lowest for no posting applications. Here we'll look at a little bit more complex discussion rubric, and again, exemplary, accomplished, developing, and unsatisfactory, a 4-point level rubric. 5 criteria or aspects. So you've got content, connection to course materials, contribution to learning community, quality of writing, articulation we talked about, and the required postings or timeliness. So this is a little bit more complicated one on a 100-point scale. And again, I'll hyperlink these so you can look at them in much more detail. So in summary here, I just encourage everybody to peruse the resources here linked and websites. And if you have any questions about this, especially on course objective mapping, and we're going to go over this a little bit more detail on the written assignment presentation. Course objective mapping is something that accreditation loves to see at the introductory, reinforcing, or mastery levels. And we'll talk about how that can be applied to a rubric. And again, typically this is a written assignment, not a discussion assignment, but it can be applied to any rubric that we create for any assignment that we feel is reflective of a course objective. So if you have questions on this presentation, please email me directly or your program director, and we'll get you answers and additional resources as needed. Thanks, and have a great day.